you so much for meeting with me after your observation.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for visiting. The kids love having extra hand. I love having extra hands in the classroom. So.
And it was a fun lesson. It was science.
Yes.
Science is always fun.
Yep.
Your students are adorable, so that made my day. So we are just going to, I'm going to ask you some questions to kind of guide our discussion about your observation and give you some feedback and hopefully collaborate and take away some good ideas from our meeting today.
Okay.
So
Good.
I'm going to just go ahead and start. What was the intended learning for the lesson and what content or standards did this align to?
So the student learning objective was matter, solids, liquids, and gases. So 3.5b, if that if that's important. And so it was just, it's a little bit of a step for them. Like they've been doing solids, liquids, and gases since kindergarten, but in third grade we take it to the next step where we talk about properties and attributes, and so that they're able to describe not only what it is, but why it is classified as that. So.
Yeah, that part of the lesson was very interesting to me. I kind of forgot about the atoms and how they're closer together in a solid.
Yes.
So it was like relearning for me. So it was super interesting. And it's pretty neat that our third graders are learning about this. So
yeah, and you got to just bring it down to their level. Like at one point we were atoms, so that would be like, okay, you're a solid, and they all had to squeeze together and like not move, and then liquid kind of bounce around.
I love that.
So, hopefully building that foundation for those older grades. So.
Yes, you are. You definitely are. Okay, so how did you connect new learning to prior learning and experience?
Well, like I said, matter is one that it's a TEK that is withstanding since kindergarten. So really just taking what I know they've learned, and that's, identifying like this is a solid, being able to give me examples of a liquid and, being a gas. And then, just taking that to the next step and just kind of giving them the vocabulary, the describing words they need, and now talking about, like I said, the why, why is this a solid? So yeah, just taking them from what they've learned, which is kindergarten through second, the identifying piece, and giving them the vocabulary to be able to describe why.
That's awesome. And I love that you know what they were already doing in kindergarten. It's important to know those and how we vertically align like that. That's very impressive. Okay, so so let's talk about your what you were doing at your small group teacher table, and then what your other students were doing around the room with their stations. We've been for 2 years focusing on small group instruction for our campus PD. And I did notice how, your students were very aware of the procedures for small group time. They knew where they were going, they knew what materials they needed. And then I also love how you incorporated that accountability piece at those stations for the students who weren't with you at the small group table. Because we've been talking a lot about that, how we want to make sure they're, showing what they're learning and kind of proving it to us. And then we have something to look back on to review if, they learned the concept. So that was awesome.
Well, I've really appreciated, like in our training, those rubrics that we have, for small group. And so, I really feel that classroom management's a strength of mine. But to be able to look at the rubric and say, okay, this is where I am. What am I missing to get me to the next part, the next point? And so for me, it was really the knowing what materials they needed and pre-teaching that before they went. So that was my struggle in small group, especially for science, because there's more materials needed.
Sure.
And then, but that, yes, those trainings and that rubric has been helpful for me to be able to rotate them through with minimal, in third grade transitions are difficult. And so, I feel like I have that expectations down, but that rubric just really helped me that next piece. And for me, that next piece was preparing them with the materials they needed. So not only did they know where to go, but they know what they needed when they got there.
Yes, because I have seen, in the past, before we really started focusing on the rubric. And by the way, I've heard a lot of positive feedback about the rubric from other people too, but just, just fully preparing them for that process, and so they know where to go, so that transition time happens very quickly and smoothly, and you're not wasting a lot of instructional time with kids running around, not knowing what they need and where to go. So
I think that's teachers' biggest fear with small group.
Yeah,
is wasted
absolutely.
time.
Because it could be total chaos, and it could be a waste of time, or it could be very purposeful and work very smoothly. So I can tell that, you have been looking and working through that rubric and really trying to see how you can get to the next level. So that's amazing.
Awesome.
So let's talk about what do you think the benefits were of teaching this particular lesson with your students in a small group?
I definitely think that being able to hear their conversations, it's much easier to hear 4 people at one time than to hear 20. And in a small group, even when I say talk to your neighbor or talk to a partner, I can hear the conversations that are happening, where in a whole group, it's more difficult to make sure that you're getting to everybody. And it's, by more difficult, I mean impossible to hear everybody talking. Also, I think in a whole group lesson, as much as you try and prepare to get everybody talking and everybody listening, in the end, it's usually one person sharing out. And so that one person gets to, talk to the whole class. And so I think in small group, I'm able to hear the conversations with each other. I'm able to, pick up on misconceptions, like on the spot. I'm able to assess learning, and where are they going wrong? Are they going wrong with explaining it? Are they going wrong, because a lot of times even we'll say like, okay, tell me what your partner said. Are they missing, did they not hear correctly? So it's hard to really assess in a larger group. So in that smaller group, I felt like I was able, before I sent them to do it on their own, I was able to pick up on, quick little fixes. So I felt like their independent practice was a more valuable grade.
Yeah, I love that. I think that is my favorite part of small group instruction, is that you can catch those misconceptions like in the moment and fix them right then and there before they go out and do their independent work, instead of they go and do their independent work and then you go home and you grade and then you come back and then you try to fix it. Just in those, in the moment, corrections and feedback are very powerful for the students and make a huge impact on their learning. So I agree with you there. So I noticed that you pulled back 2 groups to your table during that time.
I did.
You had the different cards with picture cards with examples of different objects that could be classified as a solid, liquid, or gas. Let's talk to me about how possibly, were there any drawbacks to doing the same lesson with each of those groups? Because I noticed those groups are very different. They had a very different makeup of students in them. Were there any drawbacks to that?
So I will say a struggle with small groups sometimes, especially when you're doing the mini lesson in the small group, because that's kind of this unit. That's how it was my direct teach kind of was in that. As a teacher, and I'm being fully transparent, like hearing or delivering the same instruction by the 4th time, you're kind of like, okay, over saying it. And then the other drawback is sometimes the person who got the first lesson doesn't get as good of a lesson as the last person or the last group. Because each time you're like, oh, I need to remember to say this, or oh, there was that misconception, let me include that in my, so those are kind of the drawbacks, that I don't know if they all get equal lessons. And it gets boring.
Yes, it does get boring. Trust me, I know that.
You know, and
well,
like
all too well.
for especially with science, like you want to be excited, and so that first group, you're like, you know, by the last group, you're like, okay, so this is solid.
Yes, I totally connect with that. So I noticed your one group seemed to really grasp these concepts. They were able to look at these picture cards, and you know they were using the anchor chart, which was awesome. You had them using that resource, but they were really able to quickly make a match with the picture to the different attributes. But then the second group that you worked with, they were struggling a little more. So talk to me about maybe how we could differentiate for that group of students.
So in math, I feel like I've really gotten the small group with a differentiation down, just because it happens more fluid for me. Like, okay, you need manipulatives, like you can use standard algorithm, you know, and so for science, it is definitely something that I need to work on. So I'm thinking for this, yes, my second group was struggling. My third group was even struggling more. So one, I'm reorganizing groups, but with that, you know, something that I think would be easy for them, I could still make science hands-on for them, especially this unit. It would have been very minimal prep to have, you know, a glass of water, you know, and when I'm talking about the attribute of takes the shape of its container, maybe we can pour it from one container to the next and just let them do it and kind of see. So yeah, I think hindsight 2020. I think we overthink it sometimes. And so in my mind, it's like, you have to do a whole science lesson, a whole science experiment for each group, and that can be overwhelming. But I definitely think for this unit, it would have been easier when I'm asking them to use those vocabulary words that they had been practicing in their stations, that they can maybe like touch it and feel it and experience, you know? Like even I'm looking at the picture of the balloon, like even blowing up the balloon and letting them like feel the air in their face when the balloon, when the, you know, that might have been fun and just took it to the next level for them, especially for the low ones. And then and then my higher ones, see, I still would want them to have a little bit of hands-on, because I think we fall into that too. If they're high, they don't need those experiences, so we do a little bit of hands-on, but maybe I can have them write about what they're feeling, like you know, give me a sentence of what it felt like for the balloon, for the gas to like blow in your face from the balloon, or what the, you know, if you tried to bend. So still letting them hands-on.
I love that. I love the incorporating the writing in there, just because there's such a huge focus right now on writing across our campus and across content. That would be perfect. And incorporating that vocabulary that they're using at stations. Speaking of, I know that a big component of this lesson was the vocabulary. And I loved how you had the station with the flashcards. The
flashcard factory.
Flashcard factory. Yes. That was such a cool. They were so engaged making those.
They love flashcard factory. So the problem, the hard part with vocabulary is, you know, I think we fall a lot in a lot of the even resources that are out there. It's like match the picture with the, but they don't get to like create it. They don't get to use it. They don't get to. So I thought that was a good. I think Flashcard Factory was a really good way for them to be able to write and draw the pictures and stuff like that.
Yes,
so they're engaged in it. It's a way to make it engaging.
Yeah, I love it. And also, if you did not know this, our digital learning specialist for the district, I was having a conversation with her about Flashcard Factory, which was really cool just the other day, and then I saw you using it. She said that once they create those cards, you can pick the cards that you want that are super high quality and print them out.
Wow.
To be used, like, you know, you could print them on cardstock, and then those could be at a station.
And they can put them in their
journals. Or in their journals.
Yes.
Isn't that cool? I didn't know that was a feature.
I didn't know that was a feature either.
So that's
I like that. And think about how great the kids would like to see
their own cards.
Their own cards. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I
that's
like
something
that.
to think about.
Yes, definitely.
For the future.
I like that idea.
Okay, let me see. There's some, I do want to circle back to something, but let me see. What data did you use to inform your instructional decisions that day? Like, how did you group your students? What did you use? How did you know how to group them?
So again, probably a little more fluid for me for math than for science. I do use pre-assessments. It was a real simple one, but it was more if they can identify, solid, liquid, and gas. And then I just gave them a few vocabulary words just to see if they could use them in a sentence. We do pre-assessments often, so they know it's very it's not scary to them. So if they don't know, they're allowed to write I don't know. And so yes, so that was just kind of a quick glance because it's identifying do they know, and a lot of them did well with that. So it was a little bit harder to group them, which is again a lot of my teaching was on one level. And then also, I'll be honest, behavior with when you're grouping kids, again, that's part of the rubric and the classroom management piece is that I need kids that can work together or and some of the stations, so sometimes my stations are grouped by levels, and these were not grouped by levels, but also because I knew I wasn't really leveling my teacher table. And the reason that was actually purposeful because some of the stations, I need someone who's a strong reader who can read the instructions, or I need someone who, it was more mixed, I guess, would be for these groups.
Okay, so how did you organize the physical space and create a welcoming environment that promotes learning? I mean, you did a very good job at that, but talk to me about that process.
Yeah, so we do small group often. So like I said, my goal for when they're in stations is that they're visible to me. And so I try to make sure everything that they need is available, that they know, like I said, that they know what they need, and so that they can get started right away. Again, being visible to me in all areas of the room, obviously for safety, but to make sure they're staying on task. Go Guardian, that's how I'm able to, especially that's why I felt comfortable putting them on Flashcard Factory, because they're still kids. And who knows what picture sometimes can come up.
I love how you use Go Guardian to monitor those students, and that chat feature where you can just give them a little reminder to stay on track. That
was helpful, with the Flashcard Factory, if they only had one vocabulary word done, and okay, back on task, and for me, I love the chat feature because you're not always calling. Sometimes they don't understand it, or sometimes they're having trouble. And if you're shouting out across the room, okay, you haven't answered a question, it's that embarrassment piece. So
and it's distracting.
So it's real easy to be at my table and okay, you guys talk. Okay, I'm gonna need you to, do your best, but move on.
I love it. It was cool to see you using that technology piece for that purpose. So. Okay, so let's see. How did you seek out professional development and feedback to reflect on your practice? We've been doing a lot of PD.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of PD, so it's very obvious. It's a goal of our campus. So, and I see the benefit of it. So, I include it a lot in our coaching conversations with my instructional coach, with the district instructional specialist. I have good relationships with all of them, so I don't mind asking okay, how do you see this working in a small group, or how do you see this working in stations? Our math curriculum is very broken up in that they identify what stations, where science is more here's the resources. So again, like to make it happen, it just takes a little more thought and guidance. So I think our district's done a really good job at providing us support. And so it's not just like, here's the rubric, follow it, this is where you need to be, get there. It's like, here it is, but hey, we have all this help, I can come down. And so I know our instructional specialist has come down, our science one, especially too because our TEKs are changing next year. So just giving me support on how to, fill that in. So I think just a lot of support in the district, knowing that it's our campus goal. I think they're very willing to jump in and
yes,
help
I
us.
agree. We are lucky here in our district to have that support. So, I want you to think about everything that we've talked about here today in our feedback session, and looking at this rubric.
Okay.
Small group rubric.
Yes.
And where you feel like you are, and which is here, and you're wanting to move up the rubric or down. You say the opposite, don't you, than I do? Yes, you say down, I think. And I say
down
up.
the rubric.
Yes.
I do say down, meaning I don't know why.
I don't know either, but okay. To move down.
To move to a higher level.
What do you think from some of the things that we talked about could be just a small action step that you could put in place that will take you to that next level?
Honestly, so like we talked about, I think the classroom environment is pretty solid, and I'm not
I
trying
agree
to
with that. Absolutely.
pat myself on the back, but it's just something that I feel confident in. So I feel like my kids do a good job with it. So expectation and all that. So that's the classroom environment piece. For science, and I'm glad you challenged me to think about it, because as far as differentiation, or like leveled learning, I would have put myself higher because I do it more in math, but thinking big picture more consistently in all subject areas, I definitely think that I'd probably put myself here for differentiation. And it's the planned piece that I think, like planning those leveled learning opportunities at teacher table, I think will take me to the next level there. So I think I'm glad we really had this conversation, because I really would have put myself higher on that before now. But
no, I'm glad that we talked about it too. And I just think that making those small changes and having those different levels can make a big impact on your students' learning. How do you think it would impact their learning?
Well, I think it'll be good to just really fill in those gaps in the moment. Again, even though listening and having those conversations, I'm trying to hit those misconceptions like I talked about. Am I really filling in the gaps? So I might be, hitting those misconceptions, but I don't until I get their independent practice back.
Exactly.
I'm like, did I really fill in that gap? Yes, I picked up on that misconception in the moment, but I think it would be helpful. And you know what? I think as teachers, we are I think it's innate for us to just go to the kids who need help, but it's that enrichment part too. So taking that for those, I think it would really help them. Sometimes we're like, okay, they got it, let me help you.
Yes.
But I think it would help push my, my higher kids, like I said, if they're writing about what they're experiencing at teacher tables.
Yes,
so.
I love that idea. So we can say that's going to be your action step for your science small groups.
Okay.
Differentiation.
Yeah.
Providing those different levels for your students. Even if you just start out with a couple of different levels, you can start small.
Yeah.
And then work your way up to,
Yeah, no, I think it's good.
More.
And our next unit is on living and non-living things, and so I think that would be an easy hands-on, and we can, with plants as opposed to, obviously I'm not going to bring animals in, but as obviously I'm not going to have a little, maybe fish or something. I could do, I don't know about a hermit crab. but fish,
Yes.
you know.
They would love that.
Ooh, and you know what I'm thinking too? Living, non-living, then we go into life cycles. Maybe then I can start like bringing like the frog and everything. Anyway,
yes,
but like at
yes.
the table and kind of filling that in first. So, but I think that could, yeah, now I got to think about how to differentiate this.
Okay, this is a good plan. I'm loving it.
Yeah.
One more question before we close it out. So, how did you, and you may not have had time to do this yet, but how did you or will you integrate assessment into your future instruction on this topic?
Well, I actually do. Like, so I'll do exit tickets and earlier in the week, it's when we do exit tickets, it's on prior learning.
Gotcha.
So like, and then towards the end of the week, I'll do an exit ticket on that unit that we did that week. So I plan to definitely continue to scaffold, you know, making sure that it doesn't go away.
Yes,
Because, you
I
know,
know
I think the kids think we teach it and then they don't have to ever touch it again. So that was always my purpose. I'll always do like a spiral, and I do a spiral station too.
Perfect.
So
that's awesome.
Especially with vocabulary. So.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for today. That was, I think I'm going to go be a science teacher now.
Okay, we'll come back anytime.
I'm really loving the science. It's such a fun subject to teach, and your students had a blast that day, and I can't wait to see how you differentiate for them with some of those hands-on things. I think it's going to make it even more great.
I may need to ask for help because I'm trying to think of how that will look.
I'll come help you set it up.
Okay.
All right.
I'm excited.
Awesome. Thank you
so
much.
Thanks.